Hello, and welcome to Jung at Harp. I'm Deborah Henson-Conant. I'm a composer and a performer, and I'm here with Kathleen Wiley, who is a Jungian psychoanalyst. We both play the harp, and we call this Jung at Harp. Today, we are going to talk about integrating with the darkness. Integrating in the darkness, integrating to the darkness, all of those things. Whatever preposition it is, that's what we're talking about. And we talked a bunch before we got on, and right as we were just about to get on, I was talking about something. Kathleen was saying, it seems like I'm always going, 30 miles a minute. And I explained that for me, I've been writing and composing my whole life. I've been prolific, but I go from one project to another. I've been performing or debuting something, and then it goes on the shelf and I create something new. And so all this work that I created as a composer for other people to perform is still in the darkness. And so Kathleen said, well, there you got your integration with the darkness. And Kathleen, why don't you pick it up? And I think this is relevant to many people, is that you've been doing something your whole life that's important to you, but it hasn't necessarily, there are fears that are keeping it in the darkness. And so it's not connecting to others. It's not in its shareable state. And yeah, you were talking a bit about that.
Yeah, as you were saying that just then, my mind was going in three different directions. But one of the things we were talking about pre-talk was the idea of inner and outer and how they shape one another, how they inform one another, and how really growth in the inner and spiritual dimension and the outer dimension of relationships and other people are intertwined. And one of the things that I'm struck with as we're talking about this body of work is a couple of things. That something kept you moving so quickly that you'd create something and put it on the shelf. Basically, it went into the darkness. You did it, it went into the dark. You did it, it went into the dark. And to have published it as you went would have meant slowing down to stay with what you'd just given birth to. And that there was something in the dark, we might say, that kept just prompting you to keep going instead of slowing down to be with what you'd created. And that in some ways, as you are beginning now or circling back to the DHC Legacy Project, all of those things that have been there all along are now having to be experienced. And if the DHC Legacy Project is going to move forward, they have to be experienced consciously, which means we have to experience it. We can't just think about it, talk about it, name it, conceptualize it, and put it in a box. But we have to be willing, in this case, I'm imagining sitting with a piece of work and feeling, oh my God, I could change that. Oh, I do that differently now. Or, well, that just doesn't show me off well enough, or whatever it is. All of those kinds of things are going to have to be tolerated and danced with to find their place to where they don't get to be in charge.
It's interesting that you're using the word tolerated, and I want to also make sure that we're bringing this to other people, because I think everyone has a legacy project at any point. And so for me, my legacy catalog is to make this stuff available. But it's all about being available. And as you were talking, my brain was like, well, this is what happened, and this is how come I couldn't do this. I was thinking that there was, I have a series of song cycles that I wrote in the 80s and that were performed. Everything was performed. And then more recently, it was performed again at Boston University as part of a festival of women. And then I started getting ready to publish it. Everything was moving forward until the copyist asked me questions I didn't know how to answer. I just didn't know the answer, and I didn't know how to answer it, and I knew that he couldn't answer it, and everything stopped, theoretically stopped on these questions I couldn't answer.
Mm.
Now, I don't believe that. I believe that's an excuse. I believe I would have found anything to continue to hide them. And you brought this out before we started speaking, that these things are in the darkness for a reason. I've put them in a darkness for a reason. And in part, it may be to protect them from criticism, or protect them from, more likely to protect them from me doing something wrong that ruins them.
Mm.
But the other thing that I'm realizing is that, so I recently have been working with the conductor of the Salzburg Philharmonic and a wonderful soloist to do the first full recording of my concerto sognando in Espanol. And I gave them the scores and the parts, but the part that got exciting was when we met and when the soloist showed me what she wanted to do, and I was able to say, I love that. It's not within the vocabulary of this piece. Can you just change this slightly, but keep all that? And then talk to the conductor and be able to say, you're right, I don't like this part of the piece. It's all, I put it in there so that blah, 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 blah. Let's take it out. You guys are going to work. But the point is, that it was through partnership that the piece has started to take its, I wouldn't say final shape, but its shareable shape.
Mm-hmm.
And all the time I was trying to answer these questions myself, rather than saying, I don't know the answer to this, and I don't know how to get the answer. It's intuitive for me. I don't know if it's pianissimo or mezzo piano. It has to do with the words. Look at the words. But I can't. And so this partnership, that was another thing we were thinking about talking about today.
Mm-hmm. Well, and yes, it was a partnership in the outer world, and this go round, it allowed you to access an inner partnership that had begun to be formed when you were working with the Boston Pops or Symphony for Invention and Alchemy,
Oh, with the
and you
Grand
took
Rapids
the
Symphony, yeah.
score, and the director said this won't work,
Oh,
and
with the
you,
Boston Pops, that's right.
yeah,
When I made my first score, that's right.
yeah,
Yeah,
and you then at that moment had the presence to say what would make it work.
right.
And he said, I know someone who can fix it. You
That's right.
partnered there.
That's right.
At that point, something shifted for you, something opened in you, something that had been in the dark holding you back. In that moment, got opened and integrated, which happened spontaneously, just like digestion of our food. We can't make it happen. It happened, and that moved forward. So this go round with the Salzburg conductor and soloist, when they came to you to say, this doesn't work or we're uncertain, you were able to say, because you already had a partnership, a sense of trust with
Mhm.
this bit of yourself,
Mhm.
that you could say, let's take that out.
Yep.
You all fill that in with what feels right to you. Or you could say, okay, yes, I like this, and it just, can you tweak it so it fits here?
Right.
And so that partnership in the outer was mirroring something in the inner. And the inner is part of what allowed you to create it in the outer. And again, that's one of those intertwining processes that it's kind of like digestion. What we eat affects everything else in our body. But again, we're still not in charge of it. One day I can eat shellfish and it doesn't bother me. And 3 days later, it keeps me up all night in the bathroom. I mean, you know, I mean, these things are complicated, and they do go on. Integration does go on in the dark, meaning we're not in charge of it.
Well, let me go to the moment right before we were talking about the Boston Pops when I wrote my first orchestra score, and I knew what I wanted to hear, but I didn't know how to write it down. And so when I brought it to the conductor, he looked at it and he was like, "This is not going to work." And what happened in my mind right then? I stood there, and it may have been 1 second, but it felt like this big moment when I surrendered. I surrendered, and it wasn't conscious. I surrendered to the possibility that that part of my life that might be a dream that might not happen. I stood right there and I thought, okay, I wanted to write for symphony orchestra, but maybe I'm maybe I don't know how to do that, and maybe I'll never be good at it, and maybe that's something that I need to give up. And I really completely, absolutely gave it up. And the next thought that came to me was, how might this work? How could this maybe happen? But it would never have come without that surrender. I could never have had that thought without the surrender. And I think one of the things that's been so beautiful about working with Evelyn Huber and Elizabeth Fuchs, the conductor and the soloist, first of all, trusting both of them completely, and knowing that they trust me completely, and that we are all there for the greatest meaning of the piece. Mm-hmm. And the soloist had played both the solo version and also the version with orchestra. And so she was able to say, look, there's a part in the solo version I love. Is there a way that we can bring it in to the orchestral version? And so we were able to work together with it. And then with the conductor saying, okay, this doesn't fit unless you do this. Can you bring this in here so that that's going to go there? So that was great. And then the other thing that happened is that she brought up she was able to bring up moments that I was already uncomfortable with. And because I wasn't just alone in them and thinking, well, maybe it's just me. When she was like, this moment feels awkward, I'm like, yeah, it does. Could we not do this with it? So I'm realizing as we talk that there was partnership. And one of the things that happened, I always wanted to be a composer ever since I was a child. My dream was it's me as the composer, and then there's the soloist, and then there's the conductor. But I wasn't able to communicate clearly what I wanted them to do. And so I was like, let me just show you. So in my mind, every time I got on stage, it was, I'm showing you how you would perform my music. This is how you would do it. And then I became, I just sort of by default became the performer of my work. But in fact, what's beautiful about actually, and I just did a blog post about this, so people can look at it. It's in my blog. Actually having those three parts externalized and being able to be in communication with them and having their ideas come out. This is what partnership is to me. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And therefore, the piece can come out of darkness. I don't trust it. I don't trust my own voice. I trust what I want, what I'm urged to say, the impulse, but I don't trust that I know how to write it out or how to communicate it or.
Yeah. Or sometimes people don't trust that their voice has value for anyone other than themselves, or that it doesn't have staying power.
Right. And I think a lot of that happens because when it first comes out, and I say this to students all the time, everything is born slimy. Mm-hmm. And I observe that when it first comes out, it is not formed the way it will ultimately be formed. And if you're with people who are looking at it and being like, well, no, that just doesn't sound good, they're the wrong people. You have to be in an environment where people are like, okay, I see what you're trying to do. Okay, I get it. I see what you're going for here. So let me see if I can help you get to that. But most of the time people are in a critical mindset and they're looking for what's wrong with something rather than looking for what is it that is alive in there? What is it that is shining? And how do we then give that away to come out of the darkness?
Yes, and when you said that, I'm thinking, and the critical is the exact opposite of surrendering. And the criticality prevents integration, and surrendering to what is allows integration. And that moment you surrendered to that you didn't know at that moment how to put this in a form for the orchestra. You surrendered to that reality. And as that reality was something, it slipped into its spot, and it quit blocking these other parts of you that did know how to show what you wanted to share, that did know how to show someone who knew how to record it notation wise, what it was. And so it allowed these other parts of you to step forward, because instead of this being the big old block saying, pay attention to me, it slipped right in its hole, so to speak.
Right. And instead of being this block, which is, I should know how to do this. There's something, I don't know how to do this. I can't do this.
Right.
And then the switch between I should know how to do this and I can't, between I don't know how to do this.
Right.
Maybe somebody does.
Yes. Yeah. And somewhere in you, there was enough trust. There might be someone who could fix it. Quote to speak.
Right. It never occurred to me. I mean, all I felt was my own inadequacy.
Yeah. Right.
And it never occurred to me until that moment of surrender. Now, I'm thinking I could proactively surrender every day in meditation. I mean, it actually is part of my practice to literally surrender at every moment that I can, to have that feeling of surrender. And what you just said was, I really loved, because what I heard you saying was, when you surrender, you get out of the way.
And it makes me think about, I forget if it's the 8th or 9th step, but continuing to surrender my life to the care and will of God as I understand him or her, the higher power.
You're talking about the 8th step of the 12.
12 steps, yeah, that we start off by becoming willing, to surrender, then becoming willing to believe a power greater than ourselves can restore us to sanity. But it doesn't stop there. Now we're back to step 8, and we have to continue to be willing and continue to surrender. And so that practice of meditation every day, I would say, is like going to the gym to lift the 10-pound weights and build muscle, so that when you need to pick something up, the muscle's there. So you're going through the day, all of a sudden, criticality kicks in, here's the block, and that muscle says, okay, just breathe. Instead of criticizing this, let's just accept it. Let's just see what is. And you've built that muscle of surrendering, which does allow things to integrate.
And I love that you brought in the word practice, because, for me in that moment when I surrendered, because everything I wanted and everything I hoped, it was like there was a big no. That's not going to happen every day. And you're right. We have that first surrender, or whatever it is, even if it's the first like impulse that, like, oh my God, I love this instrument, I want to play it, or whatever it is, the first moment of connection with, whether it's a higher power, or whether it's something you love, or whether it's an idea, that first moment of connection is kind of like grace. You get that. That's like a gift. But then we have to develop our ability to engage with that and to bring in that surrender. I mean, we started out talking about integration, meaning integrating those things that are in our darkness, so that they become shareable in the world, because those things are often the greatest gift that we have. And it's the thing that we are protecting the most, for good reason. But what you said is just now is, then we have to make, in order to be able to be strong enough to protect them when they come out, and not protect them with like this, but know that they have protection, is to develop that spiritual muscle.
Right.
And in Strings of Passion, and what I'm thinking about these days is that we can do that through thoughts, and in the 12 steps, it's through tools and steps, and the tools are the actions, and the steps are sort of the spiritual. We can do that with music, because there's an inside of us that is developing. In Strings of Passion, I talk about it as we play our instrument using the principles of the Strings of Passion, thinking about impulse. What is the impulse for this? Thinking about the structure of the piece, so we're not bogged down in the details of it, but we understand its fundamental movement. And then in the character of it, why is it there? What are we bringing forth? What is the experience of the piece? The character, the character of the person, the character of the music. And then the fourth, the roles. How are we integrating with the role of the harp, the role of the player, the role of the conductor, the role of the soloist? How are we integrating those roles and knowing that there are roles and not just some big thing that is music that has to be done right? Then how do we create a practice so that we are doing that, like you said, that we're actively playing the instrument and actively feeling these things, then again, deconstructing it, which is, in a sense, doing it again over and over again. How do we keep simplifying this so that we can keep adding more characters, so that we can keep, being integrated with it, so that we are speaking the music of what we are doing, we are speaking the language of what we are doing, and then finally lift off when it is integrated and we are expressing it. So by doing those things, the instrument builds on the inside, and the thoughts or how we're engaging gets seen on the outside, and then the actions and the spiritual or the actions, they start having this creative resonance. And then what we're doing on the outside is building that on the inside, and what we're doing on the inside is building it on the outside. Now, that's how I see it in Strings of Passion. Those are the principles. There are different set of principles that happen in the 12 steps. What are the principles and the actions in what Jung has brought forth? Because I'm thinking must be a set there as well.
Well, again, the primary principle, I say this over and over, is building a conscious relationship to the unconscious. That what is conscious, that we're aware of, that we are feeling and sensing and know is there, has to be willing to get in relationship to what is just becoming known through the nuances of body sensation, becoming known through impulses, becoming known through fantasy images. And so it is always back to building relationship.
What I'm loving about why I'm smiling is I'm thinking that, as I'm talking about the relationship between how a harp can help a person be more expressive and how a person can help a harp be more expressive. And as you're speaking, I'm like, wow, it's like she's talking about playing yourself, like playing yourself like an instrument.
Yeah, because really, as you were talking about the inner instrument being developed vis-a-vis the outer and the resonance, what I was thinking in Jungian psychology, what we would say is that the instrument of the self is expanding and strengthening. And that instrument of the self expands and strengthens as we build a relationship to all that is inside of us, as it is reflected in all we encounter outside of us. That a basic alchemical principle, which is also a Jungian dictum, is that as within, so without. That, we hear other great thinkers throughout the ages say it more as, it's not important what happens to you, but it's important what you do with what happens to you. Right. That's another way of saying that our inner world creates our outer reality. It's our response to. But until we have a conscious relationship to be able to see what has heretofore been in the darkness that is dictating or predicating our responses, then we stay stuck.
I'm blown away because what I'm hearing is it's about engagement, how we are engaging. And when I think about people who, for example, they begin to harp late in life, and so they're trying to do things. This isn't just them, we're all trying to do things we can't do. Instead of, for example, I can engage a single note with all of my being. I can play it with complete and absolute beauty and fluency. I could do that if I only had one finger on one hand and if I'd never played a harp before. If I can engage my body, I can engage with what I have fluency in. And why am I saying that? there was something about engagement, that engagement, full engagement, can happen at any moment with any part of us. Like, we don't have to develop a complex, something complex. And I know with music, if people can do that, if they can really be like, you know what? One note is enough. I could build a whole story around one note. Easier, I can see it, but I don't know that I can do that with my own life. I'm constantly trying to make it like, it has to be, I need somebody else from outside my inner bleh to help me see what is one note for me. How can I engage with that one note? What would that be? So Kathleen, what would that one note be for me outside of my instrument?
I would say whatever your impulses are. We're back to the first string of passion. You know, if the impulse is for comfort, if the impulse is to have a sense of belonging and community, you know, those impulses will sometimes show up masquerading as a desire to binge eat, a desire to go for sugar, and other ways. But I think that how do you find that one note of yourself is you check in with what in this moment is your heart's desire. And sometimes that means starting with the outer desire, i.e., for the brownie or whatever it is, and saying, okay, is that really what I want? Because I know I'm going to feel bad afterwards and I want to lose 5 pounds. Or is what I'm really wanting is a little time out and something that feels comforting to me? And then how might I give that to myself? So it is starting, that one note really is very tied to where you are or I am in any given moment in time and what it is we really are desiring with our whole being.
What I'm hearing is, what experience do we want to have, or what experience do we want to create for others?
Yeah.
And I think, so if I'm thinking about, I want to have that brownie, I want to have that frozen fudge bar, or 5 of them. It, I don't actually stop to think, what is the experience that I want to have or create for myself from this frozen fudge bar? And is there another way? Is there a simpler way? Is there a way that engages more of me and is more likely to actually result in that experience? Because the fudge bar probably isn't going to result in that experience. Just like if someone says, I want to have the feeling of, playing, whatever, trying to learn how to play Clair de Lune is probably not going to do that, especially if you've been playing, well, if you're me, or if you've been playing, but possibly, learning how to, I don't know, I'm going to choose some of these strings and put them up. This is something anyone could do. I could show you how to do that. And I'm going to put a couple others up, and just being able to, well, I don't like that because it's too harpy, but let me try these. Whatever notes I put up. Anyway, this is technically easy. This is technically easy. I could have the experience, and even if I was describing it to the audience, if I was saying, my fingers aren't working today. If I were saying that, my fingers aren't working today, so I can't actually play individual notes, but I can still let the harp sing. I can let the harp sing by stroking it, by letting it sing in whatever way that it sings. I can still add volume. I can still add the sense of movement. I can still add the resonance that happens after a string is played. I can still do all that. And then tomorrow, I may be able to find single notes. I may be able to add them in. And then the next day, maybe I can add more notes. Until then, I am step by step by step within the experience being able to share. Okay, so I can see that
Mm-hmm.
with the instrument. I can walk through the description, set it up technically so you don't have to do tick, 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 tick things, look for the resonance. But I don't know how to do that in the rest of my life. I would not know how to do that with a frozen fudge bar.
So here's a 1, 2, 3, perhaps kind of formula that might help. And let me just say for you and anyone listening, there's a great book by Robert Johnson, who is a Jungian analyst, by the title of Inner Work. And in that book, Inner Work, he gives examples and a description of how to do active imagination. Also, and it's to me one of the best and simplest books to read. So I'm going to give a cliff notes, but Robert Johnson's book is a great book for anybody. Ira Progoff, also, who developed intensive journal therapy, that his work is tremendous for active imagination. And the Dialogue House out of New York has a lot of his material available online for free to help you have some guidance on how to engage with what's going on inside of you.
And you'll send those to me and I'll put them in the notes.
Yeah, I'll do that. So one simple version that I use that actually came out of the 12-step tradition is that let's just start off by, you have an object, you want the fudge bar. So then you might ask yourself, what does that fudge bar represent to me emotionally? Does it represent to me feeling safe? Does it represent a sense of love and belonging, i.e. comfort and nurturing? Is it going to support my self-esteem, help me feel good about myself? And is it going to help me self-actualize to be my fullest potential? Well, chances are the fudge bar has something to do with a safety need and a love and belonging. That we often reach for food for comfort, which falls down in those two basic need categories, feeling emotionally safe and feeling a sense of belonging, not being alone. So then we can say to ourselves, how else can I get my need met? Because you're right, the fudge bar is really not going to help you feel safe emotionally. It's not going to really nurture you, because as soon as you eat it, you're going to feel guilty and the self-esteem is attacked.
Similar to, like, if you try to play a really hard piece, you're just going to feel frustrated and you're going to feel worse.
That's right. So being willing to engage and ask the question, what your question, the way you phrased it, is what experience do I want? What felt sense am I after? What basic need am I going for? To me, those are all a way to ask this, get at the same thing, which is, what is it we're after that we really need? And what we really need is very basic. I mean, and again, I'm talking from Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which the first level of need, which I've not mentioned, is physical need. Sometimes we are hungry, and we've probably all had this, a physical need of hunger. We've had a busy day. We didn't bring our healthy lunch. And so we think, oh, I'll just go through the drive-through and get something. And in that moment, we get in the drive-through and we do opt for the fried fish sandwich, even though 20 minutes later, we're feeling bad about ourselves. But again, we have to tend our physical needs. So I don't want to go too far afield, but often when people sabotage their weight management efforts by starving themselves, and so they don't eat all day, then by the end of the day, they're ravenous, and so they're going to put anything in their mouth. So taking care of our basic needs, food, shelter, rest is a basic need. Then we can deal with our safety needs, where we're in a physical space, but an emotional space, where we know we're not going to be attacked, criticized, judged, put down, ignored, wiped out. And we have to deal with that in ourselves, because often the root of addictive behaviors is we aren't safe with ourselves, because we are criticizing, judging, dismissing, ignoring, wiping out ourselves.
Right. And so being present is not really a helpful thing to do.
Right.
I want to hear more about this, and I want to ask a question that's going to be for me and for others. So I know that students, when they're like, "Oh yeah, right, I could just do this," but then I'm not doing anything. Like, or I might say, "Oh yeah, I want the experience of something cold on my mouth or whatever," and I do it, and I'm like, "But that no, no, that is not like a frozen fudge bar." So, what is the next step? I mean, we choose, like, I'm like, okay, I want to experience being free with my instrument. Okay, I'm free, but like, I'm free and bored here. So, but I saw that because I'm comfortable with this, I saw that, right, next step is just add something that helps it to get more, I don't know what. So I know how to do it with the harp, but I don't know how to get from that first thing that you're asking. So we're saying, okay, what is the experience that I want? All right, I want the experience of connection with my family through food. I want to take a break. I love sitting in my car and eating the frozen fudge bar after going shopping. I just love doing that. I feel like I'm at a drive-in, whatever. It feels like in order to create that not fudge bar version, I don't even know how to start. It just seems like this huge creative endeavor I don't know how to do.
Yeah, and that's where partnership with other people is very helpful because we don't know what we don't know. And someone else may know it, and when they speak it, it wakes up a knowing in us. It wakes up something in us. And the truth of the matter is just like with the heart, relating to ourself does require practice. It does require developing certain skill sets and techniques. And the more we practice listening, then the more we're going to hear, and then we begin to be able to discern. Okay, this is this impulse in the moment. It's what I've always done. It worked when I was 5. That's the only choice I have. But you know what? I know now if I get out of my car, go to the park, get out of my car, and take a 15-minute walk, I'll feel more connected with myself than with the fudge bar. That'll be a timeout that regenerates me. But we learn it through experimenting and through practicing and through partnership, through getting input from other people to help expand what we know on a feeling level.
Well, I'm also thinking that the fudge bar is prepared for us. It is in a box called frozen fudge bar, and I can just go take it. And I'm thinking that if I want to have other things, I'm going to need to prepare them in advance so they are as easy and as packaged as nicely in a way. So I'm not sure, and I know we're getting to the end of our time.
Yeah.
So I'm so let's just give me and everybody else one thing. Like I'm thinking that one thing I might be able to do is to just have a little box of things that I might enjoy, so that I could go there and that might be decorated nicely. I could take some time to prepare what might be alternatives,
Mhm.
and and the whole I also want to bring this back. The whole point of this is integrating so that we can then bring who we are out of the darkness, so that we can trust ourselves more, so that we actually can bring who we are to the world. That's the
Yeah,
whole point of this.
and sometimes what I tell people to do is make a list of 5 alternative things so that in the moment you're caught wanting the fudge bar or you're caught in the critical cycle, that all you have to do is go to the list. There's the list on the refrigerator, there's the list on your planner pad, there's the list on your phone. And the first thing on the list says, stop and take 3 deep breaths. Maybe the second thing on the list says, ask yourself the question, what am I really wanting? And is this going to give it to me for in a lasting way? The third thing may be, okay, here are 5 things I know always make me feel better. List them, A, B, C, D. A quick walk around the block, playing my favorite tune on my harp. Um,
Big
you
glass of water.
getting a glass of water. Okay, I'm gonna do, and you do those 5 things. And if after those 5 things, I still want the fudge bar, I'll eat it. So again, we're not gonna this isn't about trying to never eat the fudge bar, but it's about checking in. And if that fudge bar, I mean, I've had creme brulee as dessert for breakfast the last 2 mornings, chocolate creme brulee that I made over the weekend because I've been craving it for a month. So I get up, have my healthy breakfast, and then I have my half of a chocolate creme brulee early in the day. Plenty of time to work off the sugar.
Well, what I hear you saying, and we always come back to this, I hear you saying we have a relationship with it, and we can develop that conscious relationship with it. And so really what it's doing is it is enriching my relationship with that fudge bar, so that it isn't just a reaction that I think that's gonna, but I'm going through the whole thing so that it enriches it. If I then eat the fudge bar, great. I'm eating it in an enriched way and in relationship with it rather than just by reaction.
And in relationship with your deeper, larger self, so that it isn't just an impulse of the ego or learned self in the moment, but it's rooted in the largesse of who you are.
That's beautiful. And what I love about this conversation is I came in with a big question about sharing my legacy catalog, and what we're talking about is very small things I can do every day so that I can develop that relationship with myself, and so that I can get out of the way, so that I'm also surrendering and getting out of the way so that those things can start to move, and so that they can come out of the darkness, because that is what is going to happen as I am not engaging addictively with the world.
That's right. We have to lift the 1 pound weights before we lift the 20 pound weights, so to speak. So building in the day-to-day little things builds the muscle for the big things.
Well, I don't like that at all, but I hear you. And I know we have to end now. So, Kathleen, thank you so much. I just love how wherever we start, that we go to places that really open up and shed light, and that I just love being able to do this every week.
Yes, so do I.
So thank you, and I hope that those of you who have listened have got something from this, and I hope that you will share that in the YouTube comments, and along with questions that you would like us to look at in the future. So Kathleen, thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you again next week.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.